Tristan Kumar's The Final Enigma. Volume 2, The Travelers and the Outcasts. Narrated and written by Tristan Kumar. Act 10, The Precious Inmate. Part 46, The Incoherency. I watched as Patient 1 climbed up a nearby crate of supplies to scout out the area. After looking around for a while, he finally jumped back down to us. "It's too crowded to walk in the streets. We'll have to go through the alleys," he said to us. "The alleys are too dangerous. They're way too crowded," I warned. I had been here before, but it had been a while, but I still knew what I was saying. "All right, then. What's your plan, Eric?" Patient 1 asked me. I thought of better ideas, but all of them ended with Rye holding my dead body, all of us on the grounds, and killed. "Fine, the alleys are better. Still, we'll need disguises of some sort," I said, knowing that Patient 1's plan was actually better. "Right, you guys will. I'm not going with you," Patient 1 said as he began to walk away from the black corner where we were supposed to be headed. "And where are you going?" Xavier asked him as he looked for a clear path to the wall. "Well, you all go and rescue Agent 39. I'll be going to save the other travelers. We'll need them too in case you forgot," Patient 1 explained. "All right, but are you sure you won't need help?" Samantha asked him. "I've lived for this long, survived many encounters, and fought a bunch of shitty things. I should be fine," Patient 1 said. "But what if," I started. "Don't ask me any more questions. I'll start to doubt myself," Patient 1 said as we all smiled. I walked forward and gave him a hug, something that we both needed. "If he finds you," I started again. "Like I said, don't worry about me." "So what if he finds me?" "I don't know what to do. Besides, if he does find me, I'll stall for you all to get out of here instead." "How about that? A win-win," Patient 1 said. We finally stopped hugging and backed away from each other. I looked nervously as Patient 1 turned around and ran from behind the crates. He knew I was still in doubt, so he stopped. He looked back at me and smiled. "Smile, guys. We've all made it together, and this is what we've been waiting for this long. It's the real thing, and now's not the time to doubt ourselves, right?" Patient 1 turned back around and saw the nearby buildings. He ran to them. He ran down some stairs between two buildings and went under a road that also acted as a bridge. I turned around and faced the travelers. I realized that it had been a while since I had actually led them without Patient 1 there. I wasn't sure if I felt completely comfortable leading them, because the last time I did, we all almost died from the corpse crawler. "Like he said," I said to them, slowly easing myself into the leadership position once more. "This is it. I don't think we'll need those bandanas anymore, but we will need new disguises." "Why don't we just keep our bandanas on then?" Deshaun asked me. "Because we're too recognizable with them. I mean, look at them. They're bloody, dusty, and overall just disgusting. Anyone could look at us and have a mere thought about the travelers, and we'd be dead. We need something new, or at least that's what I think. You know what? How about we keep them on until we find new masks? That sounds better," I said. They all nodded, waiting for me. I was a terrible leader, wasn't I? I walked to the other side of the crate away from the other buildings where Patient 1 had run into and slid up my mask. Everyone filed behind me and I looked at them. "Don't act too suspicious," I whispered to them. I turned back around and walked out from behind the crates. We all completely walked out into the golden glow illuminating the gravel road and walked past some barriers. Eventually, we walked into the city and began to look for new disguises. Eventually, we found a large market under a large circular archway connecting many corners of the surrounding alleys and roads. The market was bustling with people of all different ages, ethnicities, and genders. It was very alive, but we focused and walked past it. Halfway under the arch, my foot sank into the gravel. I looked down and saw 5 faint gashes in the sand. The sand around it was slightly discolored, like it had mixed with something red, like blood. In the blink of an eye, I remembered standing exactly where I was when we were all listening to Agent 39's new plan. It had seemed like a few hours ago, but it had actually been around a week ago. "Come on," Xavier said behind me as I came back to my senses. I shook my head to get out of it and continued to walk. I turned around and saw the others safe and sound. I saw Harley quickly grab some large hoods from a stand when a person who wasn't looking and stuff it into her pockets. I nodded at her and she nodded back. I quickly walked forward away from the market and into the quieter alleys. Eventually, we reached a quiet place with some people occasionally walking by. We all stopped in a corner and Harley pulled out the hoods. We slid them over our heads and looked at each other. "Nice work, guys. Now we just need to make it to Agent 39, I said, and they nodded. "We're almost there," I said, as I turned around and continued walking. Suddenly, I was looking right at the corpse crawler. I felt that my heart almost fell out of my chest and my spine almost shattered into a million pieces. I gulped as it looked down at me. It seemed to scan me. I closed my eyes in probable regret for what was about to happen and nodded at it. Well, you must be Rye's creation, eh? I asked in a deeper voice, trying to convince the corpse crawler that it wasn't looking right at its targets. Suddenly, it stopped scanning me with its terrifying red eyes, looked at the others in confusion. Well, we need to go, but you're doing great, man. Can I say, man, are you know what? Never mind. Go get those travelers, man, Xavier said, making the same mistake I did. He cursed out loud as I placed my hand over my head and mouth, pretending like I was disappointed in them, although I was laughing so much, but also quietly. Sorry, I'm dumb, man. Bro, how did I just... He's sorry. Now, we'll just get out of your way. The great corpse crawler. I hope you do a great job at your job, man, Deshaun said, also messing up by saying, man. I held my breath, trying not to laugh. I could hear the others behind me trying not to laugh. Man, I'm so... Oh, shit, what Harley said as the corpse crawler looked at us in complete confusion. I wasn't sure if it was ready to kill us or just walk by. Sorry, we're all really dumb. We're kind of new here. Anyway, we'll just see you around, dude. Oh, holy, Samantha said, but all of us holding in our laughter. Bro, everyone shut up, I tried to say seriously as I turned to them. I dropped my hand and showed them that I was laughing my head off mentally. Anyway, I'm sorry, man, I said, but I realized that we were already dead. I looked up at the daunting red eyes looking over us and gulped. I knew that it was ready to kill us in mere seconds. Let's just go, I said nervously as I walked past the corpse crawler. Everyone immediately shuffled behind me like idiots and walked away from it. Sorry, dude, I yelled from down the road, realizing that I had messed up again. I cursed so loudly in humor and embarrassment that it echoed throughout the alley. Some of the other travelers couldn't hold it and burst out laughing as well. Knowing that we had screwed up so badly and couldn't recover the conversation, I began to run down the road away from the others. They ran after me, all of us giggling like a bunch of bumbling fools. But eventually we exited the alleys and reached the wall near the black corner. It was in the open, but even the corpse crawler hadn't noticed us, so I thought we were fine. We reached the walls and looked up. There was a large, narrow staircase that ascended high above the city to the black corner. I began to walk up it and everyone else followed me, silently. We all got a very beautiful view over the false city as we climbed, the gold and sunshine raining on us. The golden tint over the community seems like it was always the most beautiful part of the day, the sunset. I sighed as I looked over the beautiful but dirty city. I could still see the people from the markets, but from where I was, they looked like ants to me. Eventually, we reached the top of the stairs. The black corner wasn't actually in the corner, but it was like a crack in the wall. We weren't actually completely positive if Agent 39 was actually there in the first place, but we had to check, and this was the most likely place. We turned around the corner and saw the large black color begin to spread all over the place like an infection or a virus. It seemed like a black-colored marble, but it also looked like glass that wasn't adhesive. It was like large adhesive black pieces of cloth were covering it. We walked forward and looked into the large and tall dark veil that floated above us. We began to walk toward it away from the city, but something got in our way. A group of around 6 soldiers came out, chatting like they were friends or something. They looked up at us and immediately reached for their guns. I jumped toward one of them and grabbed their gun. We all thought the same thing and stopped the soldiers from firing and revealing where we were. I pulled out the gun from my soldier's hand and slid it along the somewhat clear floor to the edge. It slid off and began to fall the long distance to the grassy ground. I punched the man in the face and he got hit back to the ground. Don't kill them, I yelled to the others. I heard some incoherent mumbling of agreement from the others, knowing that they had heard me. I jumped over the person and placed my hand over their nose and mouth. They eventually passed out, and I set them down. It seemed that we all had finished simultaneously because everyone looked around, done with their fights at the same time. That was pretty easy, Samantha joked, and I nodded. Yeah, but if they contacted Rye, who knows the condition we would be in then, I said. Well, at least we got a new fit, Xavier said, as he eyed the army outfit. Might as well. All right, get changed, I said. I dragged my person to the far end of the ledge where we were all, and pulled off their jacket and main accessories, which distinguished them. I slid them on and looked at the wall. It was slightly reflective in the pure blackness, so I could see myself. I looked quite good, if I could say so myself. I turned around and saw the others done and chatting with each other. Hey, what is this? I asked them, as I looked at the large black veil, which was where the soldiers had come from. I don't know, but I thought I heard one of them mention the veil and something called the Incoherency. Not sure what that means, though, Deshaun said. Well, I said as I went several inches away from it. Let's find out. Stay here, guys. I walked through the veil and immediately flew away from the others. I was suddenly surrounded by 6 doorways in some liminal black void, but not quite the Norgad because that was white, although its name suggests that it should be darker. I walked forward and opened a door with many lights around it. I walked around the bright lights and looked around. I was in a small room with many windows, almost like a lounge. I noticed it was daytime as I walked up to a window. I looked down and saw the iconic buildings of Las Vegas. I was actually in one of the ships around North America. I heard a door open from my right and quickly ran back to where I had come from. I ran back inside and closed the door behind me. I ran behind another door and hid as the door to Las Vegas opened and a woman in a lab coat walked out from it. She walked to another door away from me and opened it. From behind my door, I saw that the door she picked was a bit sandier. She walked through it, and I could barely see the sky of what I thought was Mexico, where another ship was located. She closed the door, and I realized that this was a hub to the different places, but also probably one for the cage of Agent 39 somewhere. I looked around and found a blank door. I opened it and walked through. Suddenly, I was in a long, plain hall. There were many frames on the walls, each one with many different strange symbols. This was like a maze, but there was no code or key whatsoever. I needed a hint, but there was nothing at all. I decided that I had seen enough and walked back through the door I had come through. I re-entered the hub of doors and walked around through a door with some ice hanging off of it with some snow on the ground next to it. Using a common stereotype to characterize it, I assumed that this was Colorado. I walked through it and suddenly returned. "What did you see?" Harley asked me the moment I returned. "It's like a hub of different passages to the other ships around North America. One leads to a strange hall with many frames with strange symbols, but I'm not sure what that means. One of those doors has to lead to Agent 39, but I'm not sure which one yet, so I came back to get all of you," I said. "That sounds crazy," Xavier said. "No wonder they call it an incoherency then," I said. He nodded in understanding. Suddenly, I heard a large crack come from the city. We ran to the edge as a gust of fake wind came and blew past us. We saw a large monster soaring through the air. I gulped, thinking it was Patient 1, that our plan had been ruined, but I suddenly saw the monster transform into a man in a black suit. It was Rai, but he was weak and so close to dying. He flew all the way to the citadel, but hit the ground right before it. We all saw a large cloud of dust emerge from where he had landed, and many people came out to help him. "We need to hurry," Harley said as they carried Rai on a stretcher inside. It seemed that we had done serious damage and that he would be pissed at us. "You are right," I said as I turned back to the Incoherency. "We need to find Agent 39, and we need to find him now, before he dies along with us." Part 47. The Harbinger of War. I groaned in pain as the monster completely disappeared from me, both of us too weak to do anything. Some of my people ran out of the citadel and came to help me. They lifted me up onto a stretcher and began to roll me inside. We entered the building as I heard them yell to clear the area. My heart was pounding right next to my ear as I hurried through the building to the medical ward. My blood dripped off the side of the stretcher as we turned around another corner. Finally, we reached the medical room, and they quickly set me down on the medical bed. I tried to say something, but I was too weak to try. I heard frustrated and frightened chatter around me, looking for some sort of adrenaline. One doctor quickly walked to the wall of the room and pressed a button. A small cosmic web opened, and he reached inside and grabbed a syringe. I weakly watched as the web closed, and the doctor yelled at the others to get out of his way. He came to the side of my bed and injected the liquid into me. I waited for something to happen, but it didn't seem like anything was happening. I slowly closed my eyes to rest, not to give up. I went into the darkness of my mind and closed my eyes mentally. Moments later, I felt a rush of fake wind blow across my face. I opened my eyes and looked around. I was standing in murky water in a black void, but I couldn't feel the water. I breathed deeply and looked up. There was a small cosmic window back to my real body. I saw my bloody body on the bed as the doctors ran around trying to save me. The view of myself slowly started to rise further and further above me as I was about to die. My heart beat faster as the heart rate monitor went slower and slower and slower. I looked around, actually scared for the first time in my life. Tension rose as I waded through the murky water, trying to find a way out. "What is happening to me?" I asked myself, expecting the monster to answer, but it didn't. I began to hyperventilate as the sound of the heart rate monitor slowed down and echoed further and further into my mind. "Where are you?" I asked the monster urgently, out of options, as I waded even faster into the darkness. The water slowly began to rise and consume me. Seconds later, it was up to my neck. "I need you! Help me!" I yelled at the top of my lungs at the last second before I went under the water. I swam up, but I felt something gooey grab onto my leg. It was the clutches of death, ready to end my life. I tried to swim to the surface to get more air, but I was yanked back down. I screamed as I was taken under the water. I saw the lights from my vision to my real body go darker and darker as I sunk deeper and deeper. I began to lose my air as I kicked at the tenacious tentacles violently as I tried to live. Finally, I gave up. I fell to the bottom of the water onto the tentacles. They slowly started to wrap around me as my eyes began to close. My mind went blank, and I lost all my breath. Was this how I was going to die? After all I had fought for. I knew I could do nothing else, so I gave up by completely closing my eyes. Suddenly, I felt a long hand on my shoulder. Somehow, I gained air and life once more, so I turned around into the black tentacles. Inside, there was some sort of gooey cave underwater, but I also saw a person, just floating there. I knew this meant something, so I quickly burst free from the tentacles and swam toward the person with my last breath of air. I grabbed the person and looked behind me to escape, but the door was closed. Now, I was in a pitch-black room holding someone surrounded by death's slimy tentacles. Suddenly, I heard some movements, and I looked around desperately. I gagged on the water as all my air ran out. I looked up and saw a light. I quickly swam through the water to the surface as it became thicker and thicker. I reached up to the surface, kicking as hard as I could. Finally, I breached the surface and took a deep breath in. Water ran down my face as I hyperventilated. I heaved the person out of the cage and onto the area around my escape out. I felt something grab onto my leg as I moved it, but I held on tighter. I turned around and saw a large mouth with sharp teeth open, ready to consume me. It seemed to resemble the monster, but I knew that it wouldn't betray me, right? I quickly climbed up and backed away from the hole. Immediately after I was safe, large jaws snapped at me from the water, just missing. I gulped as I watched water and spit fly from all around. I backed away as the monster slowly went under the surface once more. I looked around and saw that I was on a small gray island of gravel. I was surrounded by black water, and I knew that I was still stranded in the dark depths of my mind. I looked at the person whose face was covered. I knelt down next to them on the sharp gravel and turned them over to face me. It was a much younger girl who I recognized as Sylvie. How was this possible? I asked myself, although I still expected no answers from the careless monster, if it was even there anymore. I gently shook her, but her eyes were closed shut. I looked around her body, and I noticed a large wet and bloody gash on her shoulder. I touched it, and suddenly was sucked into a new vision. It was nighttime, and I was on the street in downtown Colorado Springs, but I was also surrounded by flames, debris, and destruction. The prison of the survivors was on the fire and crashed into the ground. I saw the bodies of Jamal and Sylvie on the ground. Beside them were all the travelers and the outcasts, killed. I looked forward and saw a figure emerge from the smoke, which was pummeling into the sky like air underwater. The figure was the final Enigma, but badly injured. There was a large scar across its body, but it was still alive. Suddenly its chest slowly fell to reveal me inside of it, curled up. I was badly damaged and my eyes were closed. I watched as the monster licked its mouth as if it wanted more. Suddenly, the other version of me woke up and raised its hand at me. You did this, right? He said, and he fell limp. I prepared to walk forward to wake him and hear more, but the monster closed its body. Thank you for the ride, the monster said as it walked toward me. It reached forward and grabbed me somehow. It smiled at me. Rye. With that, it opened its large mouth and bit my head clean off, finishing its massacre. I suddenly returned and almost fell back into the hole where the teeth were. I looked at Sylvie as I wondered how much more of this nightmare I could take. Finally, Sylvie awoke. She coughed water and I quickly turned her over and helped her clear her throat. She hyperventilated as I tried to gain her attention. Sylvie? Sylvie? I asked, but I realized that she might have no idea who I was. Rye? She asked. Yes, it's me. What's going on with you? I asked. You're supposed to be dead, she said. Yeah, I just saw. Luckily, I started, but she stopped me, realizing that I clearly had no idea what was going on. I stopped talking and she hugged me. My eyes widened in shock as she held me in her embrace. I am so sorry, she said as she began to cry. Oh, no, for what? I asked. She let go of me and looked at me like I was an idiot, which I clearly was to the context of this conversation. The alternatives, killing the other Sylvie, helping bring back the monster, and everything. I should have listened to you, but I was consumed by hatred and evil, she said. Wait, what on earth are you talking about? I asked her, confused. You don't remember? I destroyed the prison of the survivors and then killed Jamal and then killed a younger version of you in our world with your school's explosion. Sylvie started. My school's explosion? Destroying the prison? Killing Jamal? What are you talking about, Sylvie? I asked her, frantically looking for answers. Don't you remember? I was with my foster dad, President Xander Jones, when we heard that some terrorists were supposedly ordered by my dad's brother, Chris, came to your school and attacked it. That resulted in the sun somehow going red and everyone coming down with a serious infection, which only your kind of blood could cure. We had to leave the planet and we killed the monster before we realized that everything was fake. You don't remember anything? Sylvie asked. Wait, Chris supplied those terrorists and we killed a monster? I asked. Yes. Remember the monster was all red and black with some gooey skin? It had a large white streak across its eyes, remember? Sylvie asked, and I became speechless. She was directly describing the final Enigma, but I had never killed it. I graduated normally, and my school was never attacked by any terrorists. I knew who Xander was, but I never heard about Chris. Right? She asked, and I looked back at her. Who are you? I don't know, I said, as I looked at her, starting to understand that this was not my Sylvie. You really don't remember anything about Las Vegas, Xander and Chris's land? Sky, Night, Electos, Rodrigo, the Life Program, the Four Seasons Hotel, the International Space Station, the Ultra Soul, the Soul Train, Sylvie started, but something caught my attention. Well, what did you say? You know about the Ultra Soul? I asked. I had heard something about it from one of the monster's complaints to me a couple of years ago, but I hadn't really asked about it because he said he was sensitive to it. Remember when General Rogers walked us around the prison of the survivors for the first time, once we had left the Life Program? Yeah, I guess one of his discussions where you were too busy looking outside, he said something about an unimaginable power called the Ultra Soul, which was basically just another thing called the Arcan, or the Arcan, which he had supposedly been looking for. However, I still don't know why you remember that of all things. He barely touched on that, Sylvie said. Wait, by Rogers you mean Aaron Rogers, correct? I asked. I think so, Sylvie explains. I stood up and paced around the small island. I began to think to myself. Before Aaron had given me control of the prison of the survivors and all its accessories to Xander, he had told me about how he had something called the Arcan. He said that he would give it to the next person who would lead once he passed away. He passed away and gave the power to Xander, who must have gotten the Arcan. When I killed him, that meant it was on his body, and he fell to the city below. Putting all of this together, I concluded that the Arcan, which was practically the most powerful thing in reality, was where we landed every single day. That son of a bitch, I started, piecing together that either the travelers had it, or it was still unclaimed and lying in the ground somewhere down there. The most powerful thing in existence was just sitting there. Suddenly, I realized that I had a burning question for Sylvie. Wait, did he say why he wanted it? I asked. Yeah, because Sylvie started, but I immediately got sucked back into the real world. Coincidences are fine, but I hated that I had to leave at that exact moment when I was about to figure out if finding and fighting for the Ultra Soul was going to be worth something or not. My eyes shot open and I gasped for air as the doctors around me let out a sigh of relief. Sir, are you? One of the doctors began to ask, but I had more important questions. How long was I gone? I asked. Well, you were flatlined for some minutes, but we brought you back, the doctor said. All right, that's fine, I said. I looked around and saw the door open. Sylvie and Jamal walked in and looked at me. Sorry, we're not taking any visitors, right? The doctor said. Let them in. Clear the room, guys. Thank you so much, also, I said to the doctors. The doctor nodded to me, and they cleared the room. Sylvie and Jamal walked inside and closed the door as the last person left. What'd you do this time? Sylvie asked, as she sat on the bottom of my bed. Let's just say that I've underestimated the travelers. Anyway, what do we know about the Arcan? I asked them. Oh boy, let's see. I think Aaron gave it to Xander, but he went missing, and now no one really knows where it is. Why? Jamal asked. Because I heard it fell right next to the travelers, I said. Then why do we need it? Sylvie asked. Because it's actually the Ultra Soul, I said. Wait, what? Jamal asked in shock of not knowing this before. Sylvie was about to say the same thing. It doesn't matter right now. What matters is we don't let the travelers get it first, I said as I finally got out of bed and stood up. Finally, the monster had healed me. I thanked them in my head, but they didn't reply. Wait, where are the travelers? I don't know. Before you left, you said that they were trapped in the ADX Florence, so you went there. Next thing we know is that you're coming back looking like you fought off a horde of friggin' demons, Jamal said. Oh no, I said quietly. I cursed loudly in anger. What? What's wrong? Sylvie asked. They're here! They're here! They're in the prison! I yelled. I burst out of the door and ran down the hallway. Sylvie and Jamal ran after me. I burst through the front door and equipped my helmet. I turned around to them and gave them some orders in the air. Search the city! Find them! Alright, what are you going to do? Jamal asked. I'm going to visit an old friend. Maybe use him as some bait, not sure. I'll figure something out, I said. I shot into the air and turned toward the black corner where Agent 39 was. I'm coming for you, I said, as if talking to the travelers somewhere in the city. And you'll want to wish you never laid a finger on me in the first goddamn place. Part 48. Finally free. Rye was finally taken into the building as I turned around and faced the Incoherency. We're just gonna go in there and find him? Deshaun asked. Yeah, might as well. He's gotta be in here, right? I said. Okay, it doesn't hurt, and it's pretty much instant, so don't freak out or panic, I said as I turned away from them. I took a deep breath. This was it. I had been waiting to officially start taking down Rye for what felt like forever ago. If only Agent 39 didn't get captured, then we could have begun, but now, this detour with the Outcasts and all was finally ending. I walked through the veil and entered the Incoherency. I stepped inside and turned around to watch everyone make it through safely. They looked around in awe in the darkness of the hub, but most of them looked at the doorways. Well, which door is first? Xavier asked me. I looked around and saw a door with some ripped-off piece of newspaper in front of the door. There was also some dust coming from under that door, probably another stereotype describing whatever disgusting and urban city was behind it. I walked to it and picked it up, and I saw it read, New York Times. New York, I said as I opened the door. I walked through the door as everyone else followed. Don't close the door, I said as we all looked around. It was a small conference room, and there really wasn't much. Xavier walked to the window and looked down at the city. Just as I remember it, he said, longingly. You lived here? Samantha asked him. Yeah, I was about to graduate before the storm came in and turned it all to shit and turned all my classmates into monsters. My mom is probably somewhere down there, Xavier said sadly. We all lost people from the storm. It affected us like a wave of poison, but don't worry. We'll make it up to them, Harley said as she walked to Xavier. She gently took his hand and they looked at each other. I know, Xavier said. And they smiled. It was very nice to see their relationship grow. From not even knowing each other to beginning to fall in love, it was amazing. I had one girlfriend when I was in college, but we decided that it wasn't going to work out, so we went our separate ways. No one really dumped the other. It was just a mutual agreement that we couldn't work out together. No one really dumped the other. It was a kind of a mutual agreement that we couldn't work together and love each other. Love is complex and hasn't really worked for me. But seeing others makes me feel good for them, and surprisingly, I find no jealousy. I'm fine either way, I guess. Xavier and Harley looked at me, and I walked toward them. I don't think he's here, Deshaun said. Yeah, I saw that he was in a weird black void or something. We gotta find a door there, then, Samantha said, backing him up. You're right, let's go, I said, as I walked back to the door. Everyone else followed, and I waited to close the door, but I saw Xavier look at New York one more time. Soon, Mom. Soon, I heard him say to himself. Harley tugged his hand, and they both walked through the door. I closed the door and looked around. I saw one with sand outside of it and knew Agent 39 wasn't in Mexico, most likely. I saw the door with the lights on it to Las Vegas, but knew he probably wouldn't be there either. I turned to another door with some fancy decorations on the side. I actually had no idea what this was because the decorating team for those doors really just used stereotypes, but not for this one, supposedly, so I opened the door. I walked inside and looked out the window. It was Los Angeles, not where Agent 39 would be. I turned back around to the other travelers in the doorway. They moved out of the way from me, and I walked through and closed the door. I turned to the final door with nothing on it. It was a plain black wooden door, eerily standing there. I opened it and re-entered the hallway with many frames with weird symbols on the wall next to large doors. What on earth? Harley said in awe. Yeah, this is the one I didn't really want to go to because I have no clue what this is, I said, being completely honest. No, it's fine. No, it's fine. We'll figure this out, Deshaun said. I nodded at them and let them explore. After a while, one of them spoke. Yeah, this isn't actually a language. It's something made up, Xavier said. Yep, I'm not sure how we're going to crack this, Samantha said. What does the first symbol on the first line look like for you, Xavier? I asked as I looked at another frame. It kind of looks like a 1 with 2 lines, a slash through it, Xavier explains. Which way does the slash go? I asked onto something. It starts at the bottom on the left and goes up to the right corner, Why, you got something? He asked as he turned away from his frame and looked at me. Kinda. This one is different because this one is upside down. Could it be a pattern or something? I asked. Here, take it off the wall and bring it to the middle, Xavier said as everyone continued to work on their own puzzle. I heard Harley and Deshaun talk to each other about matching symbols while I brought over my frame to Xavier. I set it down and placed it next to Xavier's. Sadly, it did not line up. Nope, not it, I said. I sighed and walked back to where I was before. I hung it back on the wall and looked around at it once more before moving on. In the dead center of the symbols were English letters that I could barely understand. I saw them read the name of someone that I had never heard of, but I realized what this meant. Guys, come over here, I yelled, and they all came to me. I showed them the name, and they realized what I was on. Hopefully they don't know Agent 39's real name, because then we'll never find him, I hoped, as we dispersed and looked for the names. A couple minutes later, I heard Deshaun yell something from down the long hall. I ran with Samantha toward him as some others joined us along the way. We finally reached him at a frame. We looked at it, and it luckily read, Agent 39. I cursed under my breath in shock and excitement. This was it! We found him, I said. Suddenly, we heard a door open far down the hallway. It was someone else traveling to the other bases, and luckily not in this hall. Since it was very quiet, I could hear the person have metal boots. I listened very closely with the others and heard a liquid drop hit the ground, echo toward us. It was blood, and I knew exactly who this was. Right, Xavier said, confirming what we all thought. We need to find him quickly. The moment he finds us, we're all dead, Harley said, and I nodded. I took the frame off the wall and looked at it. I looked around the frame itself and found a small button. I pressed it, and a large web opened in the hall. I walked through it, but I realized that something was seriously preventing the frame from coming along. I knew that if Rai found the frame, then we would be dead, but if he didn't, then he wouldn't know where we were. I sighed, knowing that I had to give it up. Everyone else walked inside as I placed it on the wall. I quickly walked inside the web as it closed behind me. I sighed and turned to the others. Eric, Samantha said, getting my attention. I looked past them and saw a long, rocky bridge across a large, dark gap, leading to a small cell on a little island propelled above darkness. Inside was a person sitting with her hands crossed, in thought. I gulped, knowing that it was finally time. As I walked across the narrow bridge, my heart beat faster and faster as I approached the one and only key to our success. He was the keynote member of our group that would truly help us. It might have seemed like he did nothing, but he truly did everything for me, and that shocked me, and he would lead us to victory against Rai. He wasn't scared of him. He was a good leader, and he knew how to fight better than all of us. He would take us to the top, and we would finally liberate everyone and finally be free. I finally reached his cell and stopped. I heard him breathing as everyone else stopped behind me. I prepared myself for the moments I had been waiting for and finally began. Agent 39? I asked with a shaky voice. Slowly, he raised his head and looked at me. His hair was ruffled and his clothes were bloody and dirty, but it was exactly how I had remembered him. This was the man who would help us win. This was the man who would do anything for us because he was the man I was looking for all along. Our Deus Ex Machina. Agent 39. I took a deep breath, knowing that I had finally ended serving my time and it was now time to be free. I looked up at Eric weakly. He was surrounded by many people that I didn't know. You came, I said, and Eric smiled. Harley told me that she saw you in the woods a couple days ago, so we knew we had to save you, Eric said. I nodded at all of them in a way of saying thanks. I was very tired. How have you been? Has Rai been torturing you? Someone whose name I had not known asked curiously. Not that much, but yeah. He comes in here sometimes to complain about you guys, but he always ends up yelling to the monster instead of him. Whatever beast that is, I said. That sick bastard, Eric started. Don't. I know, I said, as we both smiled at each other. So, I hate to rush this, but how are you going to get me out of here? Let's try this, he said, as he pulled out a gun that he had somehow obtained and shot the lock. I winced in surprise at the loud noise that I had not heard in a long time, as the lock surprisingly fell off. Eric pulled the door open and I stood up. I walked forward and hugged him very tightly. It's good to see you, Eric, I said. You too, Agent 39, he said, as we stopped hugging. So, who are you guys? I asked. You know who I am. That's Deshaun, Eric said as he pointed to a man with brown skin and some black hair. That's Samantha, he said as he pointed to a Hispanic woman with black hair as well. This is Xavier, he said as he pointed to another younger man with lighter brown skin. And that's Harley, who you've already met. Eric finished by pointing to Harley, who had long brown hair and white skin. They all nodded at me. Yeah, I'm Agent 39, in case you haven't figured that out yet, I said as I smiled. Eric looked at me, still in shock for meeting me for so long. I smiled back. Yeah, it's good to be back. So, you want to get out of here? Eric asked me. I knew I desperately wanted to get out and see the sun once more, but I had one thing I needed to deal with. Actually, not yet. One time when Rai came in to torture me, he secretly leaked where the engine for something is. You know what the engine is for? I asked, holding for suspense. What? Samantha asked. The storm, I said, and everyone's jaws dropped. Yeah, I know. I haven't been out there much, but I know that it can get very annoying. So if we take that out, then we won't have to worry about these stupid masks anymore, right? I asked. Immediately, all of them agreed. Are you sure you want to wait to get out of here? It's much riskier, Eric said. Thanks to Rai, I basically know this place like the back of my own hands. This will be quick and very effective. Plus, it's beneficial for all of us, right? I said. Everyone nodded, including Eric. Lead the way, Eric said, taking a step back and letting me lead. It was scary at first, but I knew that he was looking up to me, and I thought that I would have to prove myself to obtain his trust once more. All right, let's do this, I said as I jogged past him. Everybody smiled beyond excitement and anticipation as I ran past them, excited to see what I could do. They ran after me, and I finally reached the end of the hallway. Once I reached it, a large web appeared. I walked through, and everyone else followed behind me quickly. We were suddenly in a large hallway with many frames of strange symbols on the wall. I looked at them, and everyone else waited behind me. Oh, these do actually say the names of the prisoners. How long did it take you guys to find that? I asked. Wait, you found it instantly? Xavier asked, and I can tell that he was getting a little bit embarrassed with everybody else. I chuckled and smiled. No, I got a glance of it before I was locked up in my cell a while back. I woke up and then pretended to stay unconscious until I made it into my cell. Still, it only took a couple of seconds, I said. In truth, it did actually take me only a quick glance to get it. Anyway, let's go, I said. I pointed in one direction, but Eric helpfully pointed me in the other correct direction. I nodded in understanding and ran past the others down the hall. My clothes were dry and stiff from some blood from fighting in the hallway against Rai. So long ago, but I let them loosen as I ran freely. Finally, I reached the end of the hallway, but there was an obstacle. A soldier had just come out of the web and looking at us running. At that moment, I had no clue what came over me, but I punched him right in the face and knocked him out. Eric looked in shock. Oh, wow, Eric said awkwardly as we all stood around the soldier just laying on the ground. Sorry, it was probably just all my anger that stored up over the weeks that made me take him out. Also because they're killing all their prisoners. There's a system that gives us food and water, but that's it. No guests except for me, because I occasionally get Rai for no reason. Everyone could be dead, and no, I said as I looked down to the soldier. I don't blame it all on this guy, but, it's a metaphor. He didn't try to do the right thing, so he got what he deserved. Sure, if it feels right for you, man, Deshaun said. I nodded and ran through the web where he came from. I entered a room with the other doors and watched as Eric led me to a strange cosmic veil. I walked through and ran to the edge overlooking the prison of the survivors. Tears came to my eyes, for I could finally see the beauty of life. It was all artificial, but it was good enough for right then. This isn't a dream, I said as I closed my eyes and breathed in the fresh air. I'm free. Part 49. His Eyes of Blood. It's not really fresh air you're breathing, but it's good enough for you, I'd say, Eric said. I opened my eyes and smiled, knowing he was telling the truth. It was good enough. Hey, Xavier said from the group. Which way to the storm's engine? Oh, right, this way, I said, as I walked away from the edge. I walked back near the Incoherency, but not all the way inside. I pressed my hand against the wall, and white lines formed a keypad in the wall. I tried to remember what the code was, and finally remembered what Rai had accidentally leaked to me. I typed in 103108, and it opened. How on earth did you know all that? Samantha asked me as they all started to walk inside the dark room. Rai, I said, and she nodded. It was a simple answer, but it was still the truth. He does spill a lot when he's with me, for some reason. I closed the door as the last person and entered complete darkness. The room was filled with the noise of a lot of air flying through something, but we couldn't see it anyway. Harley said, confused about what to do now. I reached in the air and felt a long metal rope. I pulled it, and a small light turned on above us. There was a large, clear pipe with rushing winds inside of it. "Where are we?" Deshaun asked as everybody got closer to the pipe. "I'm not actually really sure, but I think this is some sort of vent, and now that I've had time to really think about what it is, I realize that it's probably some way of traveling," I said. I walked toward it and saw a handle. I tried to pull it, but realized I had to push it. I pushed it hard, enough to go through the wind. Once it reached its widest setting, it locked onto a latch on the other side of the pipe, locking it. If you're confused, don't worry, so were we. "Who wants to go first?" I'll go," Eric said, knowing that no one else wanted to go. He walked toward me and looked at it in confusion. How do I... You get in it, and when you're ready, you push off of it, and it'll unlatch and close. The wind will, hopefully, push you, and you'll go flying through. It'll feel like water, but it isn't, so just don't try to swim and let the wind take you. I don't think you have to turn anywhere, but if you do, then just yell something down the pipe. I'll be last," I said, and Eric nodded. Eric climbed inside and looked at me. I gave him a thumbs up. "All right, now, when you're ready, push against the door really hard and you'll go," I yelled, and he nodded. "Step back!" he yelled over the loud wind, and we all obeyed. He smiled at me as he placed his feet against the door. He shifted his feet for a second and then immediately jumped off of it. The door immediately pressed open, and we all prepared for it to slam into the wall where it came from, but it actually just slowed down and closed softly as the air flew by. I watched as Eric was instantly shot out and away from us into the wall in a matter of seconds. Everyone stared in awe and excitement. Who's next?" I asked as I turned around to the others. They all smiled, immediately eager to go on this. "I'll see you on the other side, bro," Xavier said as I stepped away. Everyone else had gone through, and it was just us now. I nodded at him, and he immediately shot out of the tunnel. Finally, it was my turn. I pushed open the door, and it locked in place. I climbed inside the decently wide tube and planted my feet on the door. I took some deep breaths in and pushed off the door. I suddenly shot through the pipe. I occasionally hit the sides of the tube, but made it through safely. There was no turn, and I finally found myself heading headfirst into the grounds. The moment I exited the tube, I flipped and turned right side up. I fell around 10 feet and landed on the ground with my head down. I looked up heroically at the others, all safe and sound. I nodded at all of them as we looked around. We were in an engine room, and there was an orangish tint to the whole room. The many engines pumped as it powered the whole prison, and it was very hot in here. I rolled up my sleeves as I looked down the large hallway of engines and saw one at the end of the hallway. It was much bigger and seemed to do something more, something that could definitely power the storm. I walked past the others and began to walk past the many engines toward it. We walked under a pretty low ceiling all the way down the hall and finally reached the pumping engine. There was a name tag on it, but it was seriously dirty and covered in thick dust, so I wiped it away with my fingers, which were already dirty anyway. I read exactly what we were looking for. Storm. "This is it," I said as the others finally reached me. I looked up to look at the whole engine. It was very tall with many knobs and pipes, and I actually couldn't believe that this was it. It wasn't on like the others, so it was probably just off for now to cool off or something. I would have thought that the wind from the vents that we had been in would have cooled it down, but I didn't really care right then. Maybe it was just a system. I found a valve on the side and walked to it. "Get ready," I said as I placed my hands on it. I quickly let go and pulled up my shirt over my nose and my mouth because there was definitely some of the storm still inside. I placed my hands back on it and took deep breaths. I twisted the tight valve and finally loosened it. I turned it more and finally opened it. I looked inside and saw pure darkness, but nothing came out. I stared in confusion. Had we gotten something wrong? Was this the storm's engine? What was wrong with it? I reached inside of it and touched the dusty bottom. As I reached inside, something dropped from my hands. Something very important. I felt my hand around and finally found something that felt like dirt. I would wondered if there was the fallen storm, so I pulled it out. I brought out a closed fist with a substance inside and turned to the others. This was the moment that we'd been waiting for. Finally, I opened my fist, and we all saw what was inside. Ash. There was only ash. I slowly let it fall from my hands. "If the storm's not here and it hasn't stopped production," Eric said, trying to figure out what we had gotten wrong. "Then what's been going on all this time?" I asked as my nose and mouth slid out from under my shirt. We all stared in confusion as the rest of the ash fell from my hands. But then we heard it. Somebody in a metal suit had landed and made a large clank on the ground near the vent. I looked up and saw a warrior. This warrior had all the blood of innocent people on his hands. He was a leader, but he was so cruel that some couldn't even consider him to be human. He had no love, no remorse, and never stopped fighting. He was a hunter, he was a leader, and he was still young. He had tortured me for the past week, and he had killed some of my friends. He had strong black armor which was dusty and dented from a fight that he had come from. He also had a black helmet over his head with a black visor. Behind the visor were his eyes of blood. He unequipped his helmet and revealed that he was pissed. He began to walk toward us in anger. He was already halfway down the room when we knew that he wasn't stopping until he had killed us all. "What did you guys do to him?" I asked. "Listen, we had to stall," Deshaun said as Rai got closer. Eric turned toward Rai, facing away from us. "Well, whatever you did, you really did a good job at it, but now it's coming right here to kill us," I said as we all turned toward Rai. I gasped when I saw Eric had left us and was running right at Rai. Eric yelled in anger, and although I knew that I should have stopped him, he would have done it anyway. By the time they reached each other, Rai hadn't even raised his fists or anything. He was completely stale. Eric punched down on Rai, but Rai grabbed his fists. Eric looked in pure fear as Rai angrily grabbed him by the back of his head. He turned to a nearby engine and began to smash Eric's head into it. Eric screamed as some of his flesh burned off every time his face touched the burning engine. He looked away from the screaming Eric and looked right at me. Death was planted like a tree for everyone, but I was the root. He knew that I had escaped, and I knew that if the travelers had rescued me a day later, then I would already be dead because Rai planned to kill me. Everyone ran toward him, but Rai continued to smash Eric into the engine. Harley raised her leg and kicked Rai in the stomach. Rai held up Eric's limp, burnt, and bloody head with one hand as he grabbed Harley's leg. He continued to look at me as he swept her leg and smashed her into the ground. He was coming for me and me alone. Once on the ground, he kicked her in the nose as she slid on the ground to another engine, her nose bleeding rapidly like a stream of water. She tried to slowly stand up and fight again, but she was too weak. More and more blood dripped off her chin as she finally gave up on fighting. Deshaun yelled in anger and attacked Rai, but Rai raised Eric and threw him at Deshaun and Samantha. They all groaned in pain as they slid back on the floor and hit an engine on the side, weakening them more and burning them. Xavier came up from behind Rai and put Rai in a chokehold. "This is what you get, you demented son of a," he started to say as I saw him tighten his arm. I thought that Rai would react to this, but he continued to look at me like a robot while he was being strangled. He reached over his head and grabbed Xavier's head. Brutally, he picked him up by his hair and swung him over his head. He raised his knee on Xavier's back and slammed it right on the metal. Xavier screamed gutturally as he fell to the ground, squirming in agony. Ryan mercilessly stepped over Xavier and walked toward me. He came right up to me, away from the other dying travelers, and looked me right in my eyes. "Well, you're free," he said. "You're insane," I said, getting angry. I knew that I wanted to punch him in the face urgently, but I knew that he would probably rip my arm in half without hesitation if I even raised my fist, so I stayed still. "I see you finally figured it out," Rai said as he looked at the open valve behind me. I saw Samantha stand up behind me, and I glared at her to stand down, and even though she saw me, she didn't care. She punched Rai in the head, and he spun around instantly. He grabbed her by the neck and lifted her up. "Do you mind?" he said as he gritted his teeth in anger. I looked away from the vulnerable Samantha as Rai slowly closed her fist. "All right, that's enough," I said. "No, I don't think so," Rai said as I saw him tighten his hand from the corner of his eyes. "I said that's enough, Rai," I said again, and Rai turned back. He threw Samantha down on the ground with the others as he kept his eyes on me. He smiled as Samantha held her red throat and gasped for air on the ground. Deshaun came to comfort her. "Yeah, you don't seem to be doing anything about it, though," Rai said as he came closer to me. "You're not even fighting me." "You know I'll die if I even try," I said. "Ha ha ha ha," Rai laughed as he walked past me to the empty chamber and open valve. "I guess you really are smart." He looked inside and chuckled. "What are you laughing about now?" I said as I turned around to him looking in the chamber. I see you found that the storm stopped running a while ago," Rai said. "Yeah, I figured you guys ran out of money to keep it going," I said, and Rai closed his eyes and smiled even more. He pushed the valve and it fell down. "No, it's something called an after effect. Yes, we ran it for around a month or so a couple years ago, but then we launched it into space. It's been continuing to deposit, but all of its materials ran out like 3 months after we sent it up. It continued to rain down and still caused some choking at first, but yeah, it was safe. The best part was watching all of you pretend like it was still at full force. Did you notice that you never saw a storm cloud like that again? Oh, really entertaining. While we were up here, we gotta watch together. I saved you the trouble, you know," Rai said, finally dropping the truth I had a lead about. I heard some people talking to Rai about the storm ending, but I didn't want to tell the travelers because then they would have lost my trust. We watched it together? I asked, getting even closer to him. You left me in a dark room and only came to torture me. You gave me all the information I needed about everything that was happening, and you didn't even know. So yeah, why would I want to be in there when I could immediately answer all the questions that you've had inside of your little goddamn brain? I could have laid out the Traveler's exact plan, but you didn't bother to ask. You had such a great power right on your fingertips, and what did you do? You dusted me off like I was nothing to you. Your loss, I guess, I said. Rai shook his head. Are you sure you know who was in control? Rai asked. Suddenly, I heard someone come down the vent. I looked around Rai as he turned around. We both saw a man with brown skin and ruffled black hair like mine, in rough white t-shirts. He didn't look like a fighter. He looked like a war hero. He was a bit older than both Rai and me, but still quite young. He looked up and looked at me. Patient one, I heard Eric say on the ground. His voice was weak, and his face was still burnt as blood seeped into his face. I looked toward Patient one in confusion, not knowing who this was. He walked down the hallway toward Rai. Rai slowly walked toward him and smiled as he opened his arms like he was welcoming him. Suddenly, Patient one raised his hands and shot large bolts of electricity at Rai. Rai's expression immediately changed as the bolt hit him. The moment he got hit, he flew right through the storm's engine. He was shot into darkness, and now I had time to figure out what was going on. You must be Agent 39, the powerful man said as I turned around to him. His hand was outstretched, waiting for me to shake it. I shook it and got shocked, of course. Sorry about that. I'm still learning how to use it. You're Patient one? I asked. Remember that fight in New York in the 60s with that monster? Patient one asked me. Yeah, I think so, but isn't that Rai? I asked. No, the monster actually possessed me first, and I was there. He gave me the strength to never age, which hasn't been going too well, and some new electricity powers, Patient one explains. And what went wrong? I asked. He wanted to kill his old host from the 1800s for some reason, but I stopped him. In doing so, he left me in an insane asylum for 80 years, and my entire family died, Patient one said morbidly. Oh, I said, not realizing it would get that dark so fast. I heard some debris moving from inside the engine where Rai was and turned around. Suddenly, the large monster walked out, angry at both of us. I nodded, knowing that it was the same monster that Rai had occasionally used to torture me. The final Enigma, Patient one said, as sparkles of electricity began to sparkle around his hand. Wow, you all have a lot of weird words, I said as we both walked toward the tall monster. I clenched my fist because after what felt like a lifetime of imprisonment with no way out and daily torture, it was finally time to end this pain and finish what I started with Eric. It was time to burn down Rai's empire. Part 50. Trapped in his mind. I watched as a long drop of saliva slowly extended from the monster as we got closer. Suddenly, it reached down and reached for Patient one and me. We barely moved out of the way, and Patient one shot the monster with more electricity. I ducked under and hit him back. Patient one slid back on the ground and slowly stood up once he stopped, but the monster didn't attack him. You're insane, I said. You'll see, the monster said, its voice slightly sounding like Rai's. It'll all be solved in the end. With that, I was done holding back. I punched the monster in the chest and it dropped to its knees. I felt all my anger that had been stored up finally ready to spend on Rai. I began to punch the monster harder and harder. With each punch, the monster got hit back and didn't decide to fight me. Fight me! I yelled at it as Patient one stopped behind me, trying to figure out whether to fight it or not. Fight me! You know it won't matter, the monster said, changing the mood. What? I asked, confused about what it meant. My time is running out. All I'm trying to do is fight for them, the monster said. What are you talking about? Who are you fighting for? I asked. Everyone, the monster said. With that one word, I knew I wasn't talking to the monster anymore. This new Rai wasn't controlled by a monster. This was the real Rai. This Rai wasn't controlled by a monster. It was the real Rai. It was him. Show me, I said, letting Rai do what he wanted. The monster slowly raised its hand, and I saw Patient one ready to attack. I slightly turned my head toward him, although not looking at him. I heard him stop, knowing that I needed to figure out what was going on with Rai and the monster, the pain he was in. The monster slowly placed its hand on my shoulder, and I placed my hand on its slimy shoulders. I slowly leaned forward and closed my eyes as our heads touched, connecting our minds. Suddenly, I was transported away from the engine room and into Rye's mind. I opened my eyes to a crystal blue sky with snow-white clouds. The sun was slightly out of my view, but it was still such a bright and sunny day. I slowly sat up and looked around. I was in the middle of a shallow ocean. There was water everywhere around me below a platform I was on, which was suspended above crystal blue water. I looked to my left and saw a large, lush island on the water. There were many trees and strange stone arches on it. I stood up and looked at what I was standing on. I was at a train station on top of the water. It was a completely blank, tannish platform with a red line a little bit away from the edge. The only actual reason I knew it was a train station was by the train tracks below the soft water when I looked over the edge. The clearest water I had ever seen. Suddenly, I heard a train coming from far away. I turned away from the island and looked right at the small train arriving at the station. It had a regular design on the side as it slowly stopped. I noticed that the train was completely empty. Finally, the train completely stopped at a door right in front of me. Through the window and up the stairs of the train, I saw one person sitting on a train looking down. It was Rye, but he wasn't a monster or in his armor. He was in comfortable-looking black pants and a rolled-up white long-sleeved t-shirt, with a hood laying behind his neck. I noticed that he had no socks and no shoes on as well. His black hair, instead of in a tight man bun, was let out and free. The clear door of the train finally opened softly, and he stood up. He walked down the stairs barefoot, and he finally reached the ground. He looked at me and smiled. "Come on," he said, and I watched as he walked behind me. The train began to go by the direction it came away from the island as I turned around to find Rye. Out of nowhere, a small bench appeared. Rye was sitting on it already, waiting for me peacefully. I walked toward him and sat down on the bench. We both peacefully looked out silently over the water. "How are you?" he asked me, breaking the solid silence. I'm fine," I said, and we returned to silence. "You know, I've been the one letting out all the secrets and hints, and it seems that someone finally caught on," Rye said, not looking away from the water. "Oh, please," I said, both of us continuing to look at the water away from each other. "I didn't do that much. You did it for others, but not really me." "No, seriously," Rye said as he finally looked at me. "If there was anyone I would let know my secrets, it'd be my brother." There it was. That was the real secret. I was Rye's brother. I had tried to keep it a secret, and I had done a pretty good job at it. "Yeah, I guess so," I said, as I saw Rye turn back to the water from my peripheral view. "I miss you," Rye said. I knew this would come up, and I knew that I wasn't ready. "How long has it been?" I asked. "Around a year," Rye said. "No, not that, you know. Your sickness," I said, mentioning something that I'll keep a secret for right now. "Oh, that," Rye said sadly. "Sorry, if you don't want to talk about it, then that's okay," I said. "No, it's fine. I gotta say it to some people. I've only broken through a couple times, and when I did, I tried to help others. For example, I helped a man named Deshaun, telling him that I knew where he was so that the monster wouldn't just kill him. I didn't want to reveal my arrival, but I helped out there. I also told some of my closest friends about the sickness and somebody who I could trust. I sent out the same girl named Harley to go and start a rebellion, and I really hope it started," Rye said, and I got his point. "I'm still trying to do all I can here, but my time's running out, man. Every time I try to connect with a monster version of myself, I know that he knows, and he's sending me back. I tried to warn you about the corpse crawler killing some leader named Sam, but it was too late. No, do not put any of the blame for the things you couldn't save in time on yourself. I know that you're doing everything you can, Rye, and you are not the one who's causing this damage," I said, boosting Rye's self-confidence. "Please, even if you do get rid of the monster from my real body, what'll that do? My face will already be plastered over the world as the man who is the devil to them. And never mind," Rye said. "What?" I asked as I turned to Rye, but he looked away, not wanting to talk about it. I thought about things, and I finally drew it back to the one thing beating him down into the ground. I know you've told people about it, I said as I heard Rai sniff, beginning to cry. But I have to ask it. If anyone has to, then it has to be me, you know. I looked at Rai before asking, wanting him to turn back, but he didn't. So I went ahead and asked, if we kill the monster and save you, how long will you have left? Rai slightly turned to me, but not all the way yet. 2 weeks, Rai said, as he looked forward, slowly moving toward me. We still continued without eye contact, but I could see that Rai was crying. I turned forward and sighed. Listen, it's my fault, I said, trying to make Rai feel better. No, it's not. It's really not, Rai said, but I strived to continue. No, I'm the one who left. I was the one who left Mom and Dad. Once I figured out that my real parents were still out there, I knew I had to find them, so I left. I didn't know that you were behind all of this until I saw you when I was in that cell. I didn't remember you, but from the moment I saw you, I knew that you were different, because you would have recognized me. But luckily, you buried me so deep in your mind that the monster couldn't use that information to try and cover it up, that you weren't really, well, you, I said. But I saw that Rai didn't look at me. I didn't know what it meant at the time. You left me, Rai said with a shaky voice. Against the sun's reflection of the water, I saw tears falling from his eyes. You left me. And when I heard that you came back, you think I just wanted to see you? I stayed silent, not knowing what to do. I needed you, Rai yelled. We were fine as a family. But what did you do? What did you do? You just left us all without a trace. The only way I found out why you left was when I eavesdropped on a conversation between Mom and Dad, Rai said, as he finally turned toward me with tears running down his eyes. 9 years later. Rai, I started, but Rai continued. And now I'm split. I'm split in half. After finding out what the monster has been doing with my body, my face, and my reputation, do you know what I did? I knew that I had to stop myself, so I began to fight. I began to break through to the real world in my body, and I fought. A couple weeks after I began to fight for my body back, I heard about you. The monster may not know about you, but I knew every single thing you did to me. All the memories of you leaving us, abandoning us when we were perfectly fine. I almost decided that I should stop because of you, but you know what I did? I put you behind me. I knew that you would eventually find me here, and I would finally have to talk to you, but I knew that in the meantime I could fight on the side. I helped the others in your group, but did you notice how I intentionally kept you in a cell? I saw you suffer and cry in your cell, away from a life you wanted and away from the people you needed in your time of desperation. Does that sound familiar? I thought that it was about time that you felt what I felt for almost all my life. So even when I broke through, I never talked about you. I only talked about others, and I never even wanted to think about you. Finally, there was a problem. The monster caught on. The monster found out what I was doing and began to prevent me from coming through. Yeah, I tried my best, but at what cost? Rai yelled at me as he raised his shirt. There were many large stab wounds covered in dry blood. The worst part is that while the monster came down here to put me in line, I continued to fight. And what did you do with your stupid freedom fighters as a first impression? Pretend like you were tortured. No, you were not tortured. I was. For so long. Fighting this unstoppable sickness while trying to deal with all of your lies drove me insane. Don't you get that? Or are you still blinded by your other stupid distractions? Whether you like it or not, you are my brother. At this point, I wish I didn't have one. I hate to say it, but you are the worst one of all time. You are careless, ignorant, and completely useless to me. I stared at Rai as he screamed his heart out and knew that I could not speak against this. Everything that he said was right, and I knew that I was useless to him. We were perfectly fine together as a family, but I was driven away by something I never found. I understand that Rai has every right to be mad at me, and all that I could do was take it in and learn about the consequences of my actions. You know, when I die, Rai started with a very shaky voice. No, don't, I started, trying not to go to that extreme. No, you don't get it. Once you get rid of the monster, then all of the effects of the sickness will catch up with me, and it'll get me even faster than usual, Rai said. Wait, you're not saying that, I started. Yeah, I'm fighting against myself just for me to die anyway. That's the point, Rai said, telling me what he's probably been thinking about for the past couple of weeks. Is there no way to stop it? I asked, but I saw Rai shake his head. I know that you want to save me, Agent 39, Rai said as my vision began to whiten as I began to leave Rai's mind and return to the engine room. But my fate is already written. This is torture to me, but as long as you're safe, in the end, then I'll know that what I've been doing is keeping at least one person I love safe. Who were you trying to protect? I asked, as Rai finally looked at me and almost disappeared. You, Rai said, and my vision completely brightened as I was brought out of the imaginative world where Rai was trapped. Now I knew what I was up against, and now I had to try not to let that distract me too much from what I had to focus on. Finally, it went dark and I opened my eyes. My head was still pressed against the monster's head. I walked backwards away from the monster as it stood up fully. I walked back to patient 1. How long was I with Rai? I asked him. Like a couple of seconds. Don't worry about it, patient 1 said. Alright, that's good, I said, as the Rai slowly seemed to convert back into his evil self with the mind of the monster. You talked with him? Patient 1 asked, as Rai finally regained his evil self and began to walk toward us. Yeah, I'll tell you later. Just remember to ask me, I said. Well, of course, but we need to deal with this first, patient 1 said as the monster got even closer, filled with anger. Yeah, talk later, I said. We looked at each other and smiled, friendly at each other. Patient 1's fist sparkled with lightning as he shot it at the monster. The monster dodged it and picked up patient 1. It picked up patient 1, and I noticed that it began to crush it. It picked him up, and I noticed that it began to crush it in its grasps. I punched where its elbow would be if it was a human, and I dropped it. Patient 1 shot lightning at its head, and it got hit back. It flew back and hit the ground. It got up on all fours and roared at us like true monster it was. I know you're in there, Rai, and I just need you to survive just a bit longer. And maybe a rough ride, but we'll meet again, I thought to myself, knowing that the real Rai, who was my brother, could try and read my thoughts. I promise, I said, trying to mend some of the wounds from abandoning him before. With that final thought, the monster leaped toward us. I jumped up and surprisingly landed on the back of the monster. I held on tightly and compressed my body as the monster reached for me with its long claws. It roared as I held on for dear life. I put my arm around the monster's neck, but then looked at Xavier. He was much better now, but I remembered how viciously he was taken out. The monster reached up and tried to grab me by the hair. I dropped my right ear to my right shoulder to avoid it, and it seemed to work. The monster became even more aggressive but significantly weaker as well. I looked toward the others and saw patient 1 help others up. Everybody up. Eventually, they were all up and luckily alive, and I saw Eric look at me on the back of the monster and say something which I couldn't hear because I was right next to the roaring monster. I'm sorry, Rai, I said calmly as the monster let out the loudest roar yet. I was talking to both my brother and the evil Rai. Although he was my brother, he still admitted that he was doing everything for me. Very heart-touching. I needed to stop the monster from attacking us for a while, so I needed to do this. Eventually, the monster gave up trying to stop me and fell to its knees. It eventually fell to the ground, unconscious. Eric limped to me as I looked over the monster. We need to kill it, Eric started, looking at the temporarily defeated monster. No, not yet, I said immediately. Why? Raya's right here. We can kill him right now, Eric said. The real reason was that I wanted to find a way to cure Raya and free him while not letting a sickness kill him. I knew that in this vast, strange reality I was in, there should be a way. I knew there had to be. We just can't, okay? But I'll tell you later. Just right now, we need to get out of here so we can make a better plan. I knew Eric desperately wanted to take Rye out while we had the perfect opportunity, but I also knew that he trusted me. The one thing I hoped was that our trust wouldn't end before Rye was safe and sound. All right, let's move, Eric said, finally making up his mind to the others. We all traveled as quickly as we could to the vent. I say traveled because some could run perfectly well while some could barely plant their feet on the ground stably. Eventually, we reached the vent and I found a ladder on the wall. I propped it up onto the vent. I prepared to jump through, but I realized that the air was still flowing into the room and not out of it. I looked at the wall and saw a large lever. I climbed down the short ladder and pushed the lever up. Suddenly, a large whirring sound shot from around the room, and I suddenly felt some of the air around us begin to leave the room. Get back to the area outside where I came from and wait for everybody. Then we can get out of here, I said. Eric nodded and climbed up the ladder. He jumped and shot through the vents once more. Eventually, everyone exited the room safely, and I was the last one. Agent 39! I heard Rye yell from behind me. I turned to him and saw his bloody face look in pure hatred toward me. You will never get out of my sight, and I will never stop hunting you! You may catch me, I said as I looked up to the vents, ready to bolt out of there. But you'll never put out the spark of rebellion I started. It's a fire to you, I said as I looked around the nearby table and formulated a plan. And you're all out of water. I jumped to the table and grabbed a grenade that was on the table for some reason. I threw it at Rye, but he just equipped his helmet to protect himself. I climbed up the ladder quickly and waved goodbye to Rye. For a split second, though, I thought I saw Rye nod back at me. It was probably my true brother nodding at me, knowing that I was onto something. I shot through the vent and watched the grenade explode under Rye. Rye and the monster roared in pain and anger. I saw Rye step back, but suddenly get sucked into the upper atmosphere as the monster roared in anger. I actually didn't expect the engine room to be at the bottom of the ship, but I sure was glad that it was. The engines luckily stayed in place, but the cold void of space began to climb up my pipe. I held my breath as I soared through the vents once more. Eventually, I reached the top. Close the door! I yelled over the loud gusts of wind. I saw Eric look at me from outside the tube and gave me a thumbs up, knowing that they were ready. This time, there was no door, so if I missed my window, who knows where I would go. I prepared myself, and when the time came, I luckily grabbed the small window. I slid through the open door immediately, and Eric closed the door the opposite way from before so it wouldn't do anything. I stood up and watched as the door began to get covered in ice as the void of space began to enter it. Go, I simply said to the others, and we all ran out of the room. We closed the door and turned around to an army of Rye's men. I guess that he had communicated with them in the engine room and gotten them ready. They pointed their guns at us, and we raised our hands weakly. Suddenly, we heard loud gunshots from behind Rye's men. I looked to some stairs near the edge and saw a bunch of people run up. They had dry blood on some spots of their bodies and rugged clothes that seemed to have survived a sandstorm. They shot at Rye's men. Duck! Eric yelled to all of us, and we did. We hid down low while these new saviors and Rye's men had a large brawl. I watched as many of Rye's men were shot down. There were more and more of Rye's men dying in a couple of seconds than the others. Some of the new people fell off the edge to the ground below, but they eventually killed everyone. I stared in horror at the dead people of Rye's army. I saw Eric run up to one of them and talk to them, but in my head, I was thinking. As I looked at the collection of Rye's dead men, I began to change the way I saw things before to the way I see them now. Before, I would have seen them as an absolute win for us, a success after temporarily defeating Rye and killing many of his men, a win for us. But after learning more about my true brother and being imprisoned, all I saw were dead humans. Everyone was fighting for survival, but everyone was also fighting for each other. We were fighting a war that didn't need to be fought. I wasn't sure who the enemy was anymore, and who was trying to save everyone. I had two perspectives, and both were good, but I wasn't sure which one I should believe at that moment. I turned back to Eric looking at me. I completely tuned them out, and now I was in an awkward situation. What now? Eric asked me, sounding like he was saying it for a second time. Let's go, I said as I walked toward the edge. Suddenly, Rye raised up from the edge with his severely damaged suit and helmet on like he was a god. He had somehow gotten back onto the prison of the survivors, and he was no longer my true brother at that moment. He was a beast. He raised his hand and shot electricity aimed right at my skull. I ducked in and hit the ground below me, cracking the ground. Patient 1 shot some of his own lightning at Rye, but Rye moved out of the way. Rye raised both of his hands and shot red and black electricity from both of his hands at us. The moment some electricity could touch one of the people who had come to save us, or us, they immediately got electrocuted and died. Patient 1 tried his best to stop Rye, but he kept on missing. Patient 1 eventually hit right near Rye's helmet, and a bit of electricity hit Rye's helmet itself. It cracked, and it fell off. The remnants of the damaged helmet flew behind Rai, but he did not care. His expression was furious, and he yelled in anger with all his might as he continued to shoot us as he floated above the edge. Eventually, I ran near the end and heard Rai step onto the platform to find us hiding. You listen. Take the rest of the travelers down to Earth and search the globe. We'll come down later, but we're truly starting a war now, and we're going to need all the help we can get. Search the globe for any survivors and find them and bring them here. Tell them that the storm is fake and that if they really want to fight for something, then come to us. We'll be back soon, Eric said to one of the remaining travelers as Rai walked closer and closer to our small outcropping of the wall near the door to the vents which led to the engine room. Should we get the Outcasts? The traveler asked. No, it's too much to ask of them, especially because they still think we killed Sam. Anyway, go, spread the word, Eric said, and the young man nodded. Eric turned to me and nodded. We ran out at Rai and began to fight him. The young man called all the remaining travelers and evacuated the war zone. They were done here. They ran down the stairs while we began to fight Rai, taking over now. At first, Rai had the advantage, but now we were defeating him. We were truly weakening him. He turned one way and got punched another, and he got kicked in another, and got kneed in the chest. Harley, Xavier, Deshaun, Samantha, Patient One, Eric, and I all fought Rai, truly fighting the war for centuries. At the time, I still didn't know what side I was on, but I still had to fight to survive. I watched Rai's face become even bloodier and bloodier as I tried to remember that I was fighting the monster and not the real Rai because the monster had stolen his face. I was going to avenge my dying brother, whether it killed me or not. Eventually, we led our fight near the edge. Rai was hanging off the edge and actually scared. At the last second, I grabbed his suit as he hung off the cliff. His blood dripped from his body, but mainly his face dripped down off of him and fell to the deep ground below. I looked at Rai and brought him closer to me so that nobody else could hear us. You may be fooling everybody else, but I can see right through you. You are not Rai. You are a monster. You have stolen his identity, but that's not the worst part, I said angrily as I slowly began to lower him off the edge. You could have possessed anyone, but you had to possess Rai. Rai is special to me, and you will always be guessing why. Doing that, possessing him is going to get you killed. Go ahead, keep fighting, you vile beast. We will defeat you. I will free Rai, and you will beg for mercy. Save yourself and try to find us. You may kill us, but I am letting you live until I can rescue Rai. The moment I do, you are going straight to the darkest pit of hell. You think that you can defeat me? Rai said as blood spilled out of his mouth. There will be times where we have given up hope, but I will always come back. To avenge the ones I love is something I will never ignore ever again. If you don't love like the heartless creature you are, then you won't understand why I'm fighting. That, you monster, will be your downfall, I said. Well then, Rai said as he slowly leaned back and smiled insanely, ready to fall. I'll see you soon, Agent 39. Finally, he was too heavy to hold, so I dropped him. He fell down off the edge. I watched as he fell further and further, and right before he hit the ground, the monster acknowledged my terms and caught itself. Rai barely held himself up as he flew toward the citadel and crashed on the lawn again. I could faintly see a woman with brown skin and long black hair and a man with short black hair and darker brown skin run out to Rai. I recognized them as Sylvie and Jamal, two of Rai's best friends. The only reason I knew that was because at one time they were also my friends through Rai. They looked up to where we were and saw our entire group standing heroically on the cliff's edge. We were battered down hard that day, but we would not stop until every single last drop of our blood had been spent fighting for this cause. We had something worth fighting for now, and although it may not be told to the next generations, at least we fought for what we believed was right. We walked away from the edge and walked down the stairs quickly as Sylvie and Jamal carried Rai inside, finally giving up. Eventually, we reached the ground and some flying ships came from the citadel. They began flying toward us and began to shoot at us as we ran across a large field back to the city. We had to get out of here, and now we had done everything. Now we just had to escape with me. We eventually reached the port outside the city where I had fought a week ago and found a large ship. We ran inside, and Deshaun and Eric ran to the controls. We started the engine as Xavier and Harley got on the guns around the ship. Samantha opened the door and pulled out a large gun. Everybody shot at the ships coming toward us as I ran toward the cockpit to get the hell out of there. The ship shook a couple times, but I finally reached the top. How are we going to get out of here? I asked as the ship moved more and more. The gate isn't opening. They're not letting us through, Deshaun said as he looked around for another button. I looked around on the control panel and suddenly saw a large lever. There was a sticky note below it that read, "The Archipelago for an upcoming mission. Do not touch." "There! Go to the Archipelago! They must have some importance because it's their next mission," I yelled as I pointed to the button. "But then they'll know where we are," Eric yelled as more and more blasts hit the ship. A small alarm went off above us from too much damage as we tried to figure out what to do. "What, do you plan to just sit here until a ship explodes then?" I yelled, knowing that we were out of options and that there was no more time to explain. Eric thought about it for a second and finally gave up on trying to think of more options out of this. "Press it," Eric said to Deshaun confidently. Without hesitation, Deshaun turned around. "Get inside, we're leaving," he yelled to the others. "Go, we're ready," Harley yelled as I heard the door close. "Here goes nothing," Deshaun said as he pushed the lever forward. We all looked forward, and very anticlimactically, nothing happened. "What's wrong?" I asked as another blast hit the ship. "What, do I look like a flying ship engineer? I haven't even flown this before, let alone seen it. I don't know what's going on," Deshaun said. "Wait, guys, look," Eric said as he pointed out the window. We all looked out and saw a small red portal form in front of us. "Go into it, quickly, that must be it," Deshaun tried to move the ship forward, but it was suddenly stuck on autopilot now. Suddenly, it began moving backwards slowly. "Hey, we gotta go," I yelled as more blasts hit the ship. I heard someone scream from below as a pipe broke and loud hissing sound came on. I looked forward as the ship continued to move backwards and forwards and rocking all over the place. The red portal expanded bigger and bigger, and the more I looked into it, the more it stretched and became. Without warning, the ship stopped. "Guys," Eric said as the ship began to make a loud humming noise, preparing to jump through. "Where are we going?" Suddenly, the ship shot through the portal. I heard everyone scream as they fell down, including me. I fell to the back, but held on. The ship shot through the portal at the speed of light, and we flew through it for a while. I tried to watch from the outside, but I was pressed so hard against the wall that it was almost impossible to see. Finally, we reached some sort of cosmic barrier. I couldn't see what it was, but it was outlined by a sparkling white electricity. Everybody seemed to begin to scream as their minds seemed to melt. Eventually, the solid lines of the barrier began to curve as the ship began to pass through it. I felt as if someone was squeezing my brains, and the ship finally pulled through the barrier. Finally, the red portal went away as we were flying through the clouds. We looked out the window, not sure where in the multiverse we were. Eventually, we came out of the clouds and headed right towards something that looked like a jungle. We all braced ourselves, and the ship finally hit the ground, and that's when I blacked out. I finally regained consciousness and looked up. I was in a forest, and I could feel shards of metal in my body somewhere. I stood up and looked at my body. Luckily, I was not hit. It was just scraping off the skin. I looked around and saw that I was near a beach. I ran toward it and looked around. I was on a ring of land. I gasped as I saw a small train station on the shallow water. I looked around the island and knew that whatever the prison was planning to do here, they were definitely onto something important. I looked up at the blue sky with white clouds and finally looked down at the sand. On it was a colorful ball made of cosmic material. It was around the size of a bowling ball, and it was just sitting there, defenseless. I didn't know it at the time, but that was the most important thing of all of reality, and it was right in front of me in the sand. It was an object I didn't know the name of at the time, but what I would soon learn was the one and only source of all reality itself, the one thing that could solve any of my problems and maybe, just maybe, save my brother and end this violent war I had created. The Ultra Soul. This act was recorded by Tristan Kumar and narrated. If you enjoyed this, make sure to check out Volume 3, The Evolution of Darkness. Ladies and gentlemen, we did it. We finished Volume 2. This is crazy. I did not remember this volume being this good. This is a long act. Yeah, I'm sorry this is so long. But yes, this is the end of Volume 2. We will now be moving into Volume 3. And congratulations, if you made it this far. You are halfway through the tetralogy, the 4 books. We covered Volume 1, Volume 2, and just now it's going to get ramping up the darkness and violence and very, very dramatic things in Volume 3 and 4. But if you want to see that, check around and find out. This has been Tristan Kumar, of course, your guide to these terrible, terrible stories. And if you enjoyed this, make sure to check out Act 11, which will be coming soon, maybe? And yes, thank you so much. If you are even being here, you are amazing so much. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!